Happy Sunday! I have a Rubik's Cube right here.
We got Pokemon in my hand.
Pikachu.
Who else is his name?
Bye.
Tomato. That's a great name.
Charmander.
Because he looks like tomato.
Mm-hmm.
He got his... Maybe I'll take this.
Okay. Today we are going to finish up Simon of Cyrene. Last week we talked about how Simon of Cyrene carried Jesus' cross for him. We talked about how he was a passerby. The soldiers went over to him, told him he was going to carry the cross. He carried it for them. And some people Simon considered this, carrying Jesus' burden. Only if it was just for a short amount of time. He carried Jesus' burden. So we're going to finish talking about Simon today as we talk about 3 burdens. We're going to talk about the burden of persecution, bearing one another's burdens, and the burden of responsibility. And all of these pertain to Simon because he bared the burden of persecution. He carried the cross of the one that was being persecuted. He bared another burden, same along those lines. He carried it for Jesus, and he had the responsibility when the soldiers came up to him and said, "You're going to do this." He had the responsibility of fulfilling the job. So we're going to look at those 3 burdens and apply them to our life. First is the burden of persecution. Luke 9:23 says, "And he said to all, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me." We are to daily follow Christ, no matter what may come our way. Not once a month, once a week, once a year, daily. This verse here, it is meaning no matter what persecution you will endure, we are still to follow Christ. And if we are true Christians, we are going to face some type of persecution in our lifetime. And that's because we live in a sinful world. A perfect world, there would be no persecution. We live in a sinful world. There will be persecution. And when we talked about this in our teen class, a lot of times we think of persecution like in other countries, that if you believe in God, you're persecuted. You could be put to death. You have consequences. We don't see that here in America, but we are persecuted. And it's a different type of persecution. We get those looks when you say you're from Church of Christ. You get the, "Oh, you're one of those," or "Oh, you believe this way," or "Oh, that's not technically persecution because it's not resulting in death, but you have that you're categorized, I guess. You're put in a certain group because of who you are. And sometimes that does lead to being made fun of, having comments made about you. Just a different type of persecution. There's more than just you're being put to death for if you believe in God. So how do we respond to that? When somebody comes up to you and says, "Oh, you're one of those," and we've all been there. I have. Workplace, families, neighborhoods, friends. You get that, "Oh." How do we respond? Do we get offensive? Do we get judgmental? Do we cause a problem? How do we respond to that persecution? And when we are persecuted, do we stand up for what is right, or do we give in to it? So many times, which it seems such a simple example, just like what I said, we're talking, everybody's talking around the table, and someone says, "Oh, well, church comes up," and "Oh, where do you go?" "Well, I go to Fulton Church of Christ." "Oh, that church." What's my response going to be? Am I immediately going to be defensive? "Oh, yeah, I know what you mean. We have those people there. They act like that. Yeah, but that's not me. Or do we quickly change our story? I've been in situations before the person quickly changes their story. "Oh, did I say Fulton Church of Christ? Oh, I meant I went there, but now I go to so-and-so." Do we try to shun from what could be our persecution, or do we stand up and be like, and not either, I just don't say anything at all, I just politely nod and shake my head, especially if there's a bunch of people around. Now, if it's one-on-one, it might go into a deeper conversation. But what do we do? What do we do with our persecutions? Acts 5:41 and 42 says, "Then they left the presence of the council, rejoicing that they were counted worthy to suffer dishonor for the name. And every day in the temple and from house to house, they did not cease teaching and preaching that the Christ is Jesus." So here again, these apostles, this is right after the apostles were beaten. And what do? The verses tell us they go out from house to house teaching and preaching that Christ is Jesus. It didn't stop them. Just like me telling you that little example a minute ago, we're sitting around the table and someone finds out that you go to a certain place, a certain, you go to Church of Christ, I don't want to say domination, but you go to a certain church and they have that. But that could be a one-time thing, right? You leave dinner table, you may never see that person again. But what about in the workplace? And I've been there too. When you have coworkers who go to a different church, do we treat them the same? Do they treat us the same? We know the answer. I don't need to get into that. But what do we do? What do we do when it comes up and says, oh, well, mine was, oh, you're a preacher's wife, so you don't do so-and-so. Or, oh, you're a preacher's wife, so you can't do this. Or, oh, you're a preacher's wife, so you can't be involved or invited to this. How do we handle that? And after that, what is my attitude towards that person when I come to work the next day? What is my attitude when something comes up and I need to invite that person to something? Do I include them? Do I exclude them? What do I do? But what did the apostles do? They were beaten. They were persecuted. And they still got up and they went and preached and taught the good news. Their persecution did not stop them from telling the truth. Because it did not stop them telling people about Jesus, they grew. We, if we are like them, will grow as well when we go through persecutions if we keep our faith. If we don't let the persecutions veer us off the right path, cause us to sin, if we don't fall to our persecutions, we will grow. Our faith strengthens when all else seems to fail. The Bible tells us that our faith will be tested. It doesn't tell us when, doesn't tell us how. It says it will be. Are we ready? Will we pass that test when that time comes? Will our faith withstand the test? How do we handle persecution? How do we handle it when it comes up? What do we do? The second burden we have is bearing others' burdens. We all sin. And sometimes that sin needs intervention from our church family or from somebody. But we're going to take church family in this instance. Galatians 6:1 tells us who is to intervene when a sin like this happens. It says, "Brothers, if anyone is caught in any transgression, you who are spiritual should restore him in a spirit of gentleness. Keep watch on yourself, lest you too be tempted." So, who's supposed to go to this brother? It's a public sin. They see it's happening. You know it's going on. Or you're caught in it. Who's supposed to help you? Who's supposed to be there for you? A spiritual person. Spiritual. Someone who's supposed to lead you in the right direction. Someone who may have been in that situation before, but kept their faith, kept going on the right path, and overcame that. That who needs to intervene when we see someone is failing, when someone is sinning. How do we do it? Do we just go up and call them out? Do we go and make a big scene? Do we go in front of the church and say, hey, I saw so-and-so, they were doing this, and this? Do we call them out in Bible class? Do we talk about them? No. What does it tell us to do? In verse 2, Galatians 6, verse 2, bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. Bear it. Bear their burden. Simon bared Jesus' burden. Be Simon. Every burden we bear is important, but there is nothing more special than helping others overcome their sin. And we know that in James 5:20, because it says, let him know that whoever brings back a sinner from his wandering will save his soul from death and cover a multitude of sins. So yes, we need to make sure we are in check, that we're riding on the right, or that we're walking on the right path, that we are that spiritual person that, number one, can see when someone else needs help. When their sin is spiraling out of control, when they need help, we need to be that spiritual person that can go to them and bear their burden. Share it with them. Don't just go and tell them what they need to do. Don't, we say write them out about it. Don't just harp on them all the time. Bear it with them. Take the load. Show them what a true Christian does. And lastly, so we have to deal with our persecutions. We have to bear one another's burdens. And lastly, we have the burden of responsibility. And this one is real short and real sweet. We are commanded to bear one another's burdens. We are commanded in the Bible. We are to do it. Do we? Can we honestly say we bear someone's burdens? Or do we say, oh, well, I've got all my own burdens. I've got all of this to do. I really don't need somebody else's. We are called to bear one of our burdens. We all have burdens to bear. We all need to follow Jesus like the Bible calls us to do. And another thing I thought about when it's talking about bearing one of our burdens, a lot of times the people who need us the most won't tell you they need you. Meaning, nobody wants to be a burden to somebody else. But those are the ones that need you the most. Not saying they're a burden, but they're going through something so heavy, so hard that they need you. But they're the ones that push you away the most. They're the ones that I don't want to talk to anybody. You all don't need anything else on your plate. You know, you have too much to do already. And I hear it, all families, I think, hear it from parents. When you have elderly parents, when they get to that age, that either their health starts failing or something happens, or they just flat out just get old. From my experience, both of my parents have gone. They both said, I don't want to be a burden. No matter what happens, I don't want to be a burden. I don't want to burden my kids. I don't want, they have so much on their plate. We should never feel like that. As Christians, when we have something on our heart, on our mind, that we're just struggling with, we should be able to have any number of brothers or sisters in Christ that we can call in an instant. And they're there for us. And they would never think that we are a burden. And why? Because we are called to bear one another's burdens. That is what we're called to do. We are called to be there for one another. Are we? Or are we the other one of, I've got this much on my plate right now. You would add this much to my plate. I just don't have time for you. No, we are to bear one another's burdens. How are we handling our persecution? How are we doing with bearing one another's burdens? Do we take that responsibility of bearing one another's burdens seriously? That's what I'm going to leave you with this week. Next week, I think we talk about the women that were at the cross, and that chapter is pretty interesting. So I learned a lot from that chapter as well, and I hope you do. As always, thanks for listening. I hope you'll have a great Sunday, and I will see you all next week.